Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thanks for joining us for this webinar, our fireside chat for soup to nuts on devices for Kandy. Thanks, everyone, for being a part of this session. My name is John Ryan, Channel Marketing Manager at Ribbon, and I have with us Dave Fowler, Senior Manager of Cloud and Advanced Services, as well as Sarah Hughes, VP of Customer Success. We'll take you through several topics and best practices around provisioning, management, and troubleshooting of phones and devices on the Kandy platform. If you have any questions, please feel free to submit them to the Q&A window, and we'll try to get to them as soon as we can. And we'll also send you the webinar replay within about 48 hours. And with that, I'll send things over to Sarah, who will get this webinar started.
Thank you, John. Again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. One of the first things that we wanted to do is give kind of a little overview of what we're going to talk about. We're going to, first of all, kick it off with a recent announcement. I don't know if you've heard about that. We had a webinar last Tuesday where Sasha Guerra, the head of our business unit, went through a lot of the questions and the information surrounding the recent announcement. I'll go through that as well. And so if you want to go back to that and play that replay, if you don't have access to it, let us know, and we'll be happy to send that to you. And then we'll start our topic of soup to nuts on devices. And you can see here there's a lot of content. Dave Fowler is going to go through that. Please make sure if you have questions during the session, don't have to wait for a pause. You can at any time put that in the questions window. Jason Whitaker, as well as myself and others, will be standing by to answer your questions, and as well as Dave Fowler. So you can see here we're going to talk about documentation about devices. We'll also talk about zero-touch provisioning. We'll talk about admin fields that relate to device provisioning. We'll talk about generic device provisioning, device management at the partner level, as well as the customer, whether that's an SMB or an organization. We'll talk about the device parameters, device buttons, keys, soft keys, expansion modules, and templates. And we'll also talk about how to assign those to subscribers, syncing devices, talk about notifications on devices, and some really cool debug tools that maybe you weren't aware of, and also tools that will help you to reset devices and go into factory default settings if needed. So let's start off with the recent announcement. On August the 5th, Ribbon and AVC Technologies, which is American Virtual Cloud Technologies, signed a definitive agreement to sell the Kandy business unit to AVC Technologies. And this will include all of our unified communications as a service products, cloud-based, as well as our call center as a service and our communications platform as a service products. Lock, stock, and barrel, there'll be a lot of people that move over to AVC Technologies, and Ribbon will be, at least by the close and all of that, we expect that to happen in the next few months, and that Ribbon will retain 20-some-odd% equity in AVC Technologies, as well as have a couple of board seats. So Ribbon will continue to have engagement with AVC Technology and the Kandy platform and services. But this was something that AVC was looking for, a cloud-based platform. They are also, they sell in a channel model and looking to round out their portfolio. We will be our own business unit, and I say we because a lot of the people who are on this call, Dave Fowler, myself, Jason Whitaker, and others, will be going as well. And it will be business as usual through the end of the year, we anticipate. And the people that you've been used to dealing with from the support standpoint, from operations, from customer success, product management, our development teams, and all of that are also going over. So the people that you interact with, you'll continue to interact with them. So let me give you a little bit about the company and a little bit about the people running the business. So there are some big players here with some strong pedigrees, and also in voice over IP. You'll see that some have come from AT&T and their career, as well as from Vonage. So That and other big names in here. Sasha Guerra will be the president of the Kandy Business Solutions. The business unit there will go over. There'll be again, a lot of the people that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis with Kandy will continue to be your touch points. And again, we will contain the same data centers. We're not moving platforms, anything like that. It will be something that on the left-hand side of this diagram, if you will, kind of the big picture here, on the left-hand side in blue are things that are made up of another business unit that was an acquisition in April called Computex. And these things have to do with managed services, managed IT services, managed cybersecurity and things that we'll be able to tie into when it makes sense. And then on the right-hand side are the pink items are the unified communications, the cloud-based unified communications. Ribbon will retain on-premise unified communications, the SIP app server, but we will have the SIP app server for the cloud. And the communications platform as a service, CPaaS, and the call center as a service will all go and make up that area of it. Along the bottom, strategic alliances, that's where you as our partners, these are your value-added services and your connectivity and the things that you do that make up the complete solution. So we're very excited about this. We feel like this is something that, you know, as Ribbon has grown and acquired additional companies, the cloud-based part of the company has shrunk in the number of, you know, the amount of investment that can be made and those types of things. And now with this, there's quite a bit of investment that will be made. You're going to see a lot of the roadmap in the next probably 6 to 12 months. You'll see a big difference. We'll have a lot more control over things because we're actually taking the intellectual property and the source code for the key elements underneath the hood here. And so we'll be able to drive that and provide, you know, additional functionality that has been needed and add additional capabilities and strengthen the platform for all of our partners. So we're, like I said, we're very excited about that. We feel like it's a win for Ribbon because Ribbon will continue to stay engaged and will be able to utilize these services. It's a win for Kandy because, you know, it's not a divestiture where we're forcing our partners to go to a different platform. Our partners are going to stay on this platform. And it's also a win for our partners because now there are things with AVC technologies in the other side that you'll also be able to leverage. And so we're working through the logistics on that. We're working through frequently asked questions for our partners. We're going to communicate that outward. As things change, you know, we have a transition agreement with Ribbon for the next 6 to 12 months so that we can continue that. We're not going to impact you or have disruptions in your customer base or in your processes. We'll communicate early and often with you about these changes as we move things over, and especially on when we close the deal, okay? So a lot of the questions that come up are, will I still be working with the same people I'm working with? Yes. At least through, we envision the end of the year, the same salesperson, depending upon where you are. And if you have questions about this, you can email customersuccess@rbbn.com, and that goes to a team of us. We can answer a lot of those questions. All right, so again, the UCaaS, the CCaaS, and the CPaaS products are all going over. And if you, you know, many of you we're focusing this webinar on a lot of the UCaaS capabilities, but the call center as a service, you know, that is a piece of this as well as the platform as a service. Okay, so again, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. I'll answer them as we go along. I did want to show you the documentation that is out on the support portal. And if you do not have a login to the support portal, that can be, you can register, and it's on our website under support services, support services. And here I've provided a link to this as well. Underneath the login button, there's a pink login button, and underneath that you can register. So if you do not have a login or forgot your password, that's one of two things, one way you can do. You don't have to get a hold of us to register. You can do it there. So you'll notice we do have several documents. One in particular I want to highlight is a how-to guide. We've started to create these how-to guides for certain features and functionality. And one is how to add a device to the portal. These have been common questions and also what necessitated this webinar today. Terminal configuration, then supported devices. That's always a good document to look at. We update that every single release we have, so you can see, hey, we now support this phone from this vendor, and oh, by the way, this firmware is what we've tested on. So you can look at that. Gateway configuration guides. You know, a few years back, we acquired Edgewater, which the Edgemark products were part of that, and we also have a configuration guide for that. Polycom and Yealink are zero-touch provisioning, as well as audio codes. Those are all documents that tell you how to put this stuff together. And we also have Cisco coming in a later release. So if you have not taken a look at any of these documents, I think it would be wise to log in, get access, and take a look at them. We do update them throughout the year as needed. Okay, so I'm going to now hand it over to Dave Fowler. I'll stop sharing and let him begin with the rest of the scheduled broadcast.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is our second Fireside webinar. For those who haven't seen the previous one, it was on opening cases, troubleshooting, and the tools that we have in the portal for that. So I highly recommend watching that one if you did not see that one before, because I think it has some good information. Today, we're going to be talking about device management in the portal. And we use a process called zero-touch provisioning, ZTP. And what ZTP is, I'm going to go at a high level here, we have certain vendors of phones out there, Polycom, Yealink, and audio codes are the current ones that we work with, and Cisco will be added in the future, where they provide a server where we can go in and provision the Macs of phones on their servers, and then in that server provisioning, it points to our portals and for the phones to come and download a configuration. So the process is you provision a phone through our portal, we in turn provision that phone through the ZTP server for the appropriate vendor, and then when you factory reset a phone, your phone, within the firmware of the phone, it's programmed to tell the phone to go to the vendor's server to look for a configuration. So you factory reset the phone checks in with the vendor server, the vendor responds back with a URL pointing to our systems, and then the phone connects to our systems and pulls down a configuration file. So a couple of points to note about the whole ZTP process. We provision once a minute for Yealink and for audio codes. So when you go and add phones in the portal to be provisioned, those get put into a queue of all the requests that are coming in. So your request, any other requests, and we break them out into vendor types. And once a minute, we try to go into Yealink or audio codes and provision those phones. With Polycom, we do that every 6 minutes. So there's a couple of points about that. Depending on how many devices are being added, it can take multiple iterations to work through the devices. So in general, we usually say wait at least 30 minutes for a Polycom to be added, because we get lots of requests for adding Polycoms, and wait at least 10 minutes for Yealink or audio codes. There are times where the vendors go into some type of maintenance mode where we are unable to provision. We continue to try to provision until we are able to, but you'll see a device in waiting to add state, and that means that we have not yet been able to provision it. Something else that might cause that is, let's say you bought a phone from another company or off eBay or whatever that had previously been provisioned by another company on the ZTP server. Well, if we go to add the same Mac to, say, Polycom would reject that because it's already provisioned under a different company. in those situations, we have no ability to go in and delete that from Polycom. So in those situations, we would respond back saying, this exists under Polycom. You would need to get in touch with Polycom to, I guess, prove that you own the phone and get that deleted so that it can be provisioned through us. So we do see that from time to time. But again, if one of the companies goes into some type of maintenance mode or is having a problem, we will continue to try to add it until it is done. Now, one advancement in the portal from previously, we used to require a phone be in a ready state prior to adding the phone to a subscriber. Well, this can cause problems because if it's taking several iterations and you're doing provisioning of phones and subscribers, you would have to wait for the phone to go ready before you could assign it to a subscriber. Now you can assign a phone in a waiting to add state to a subscriber and do all the provisioning associated with it. The one thing you need to be aware of, though, is factory resetting the phone is not going to pull down the configuration because the phone has not been provisioned on the provider's ZTP server yet. So if you factory reset it when it's still in a waiting to add state, it's not going to pull down our configuration because it's not on their servers yet. So, okay, so we're going to get into a little bit about provisioning. We're going to start with generic templates because in addition to Polycom, Yealink, and audio codes, we do provide the ability to do generic device provisioning. And what that does is that allows you to go in and define configuration files for whatever phone type you have. And then we provide a URL that you can put into a DNS server or a DHCP server that tells the phones when they connect to the DHCP server to go to this link to pull down a configuration file. So one point about that before we get into it is from a partner portal perspective, when you add an SMB, there are two settings in the addition of the SMB that you need to pay attention to with regard to device management. One of them is device key management, and we will get into what device keys are later in this webinar. But if you'll notice, that one is not grayed out. That means this one can be changed after you've set it. So, but what this does is with it being enabled, it provides the SMB the ability to manage device keys on an SMB level. Their administrators can go and do this. If this was disabled, only the partner can manage that. The other one is the generic device management. So this one, once you've set it, it's set. We can't undo that setting. So if you disable that, that means the SMB cannot add generic devices through the portal. So be careful with this setting because once it's set, like any of the ones that are grayed out, it's set. So, but those are the two from a partner perspective that you have to pay attention to when adding an SMB. So let's get into generic device provisioning. So the first thing you have to do is you go into provision templates, and you can come in here and you can define templates for whatever phone type you have. This is Ribbon's portal, and we have a lot of legacy LG phones. So we have a ton of those phones in use for our subscribers. So we've come in here and we've created templates that for each of the device types. And the best way to do this is to have a device that's up and then go in and pull down the configuration from the device, and then you can create a template from that. So one thing to point out about the templates is everywhere you see these double brackets here is a variable that's passed in. So, and it takes it from, for example, the primary user DID of the subscriber. So these are all variables that the portal will automatically fill in when it sends down the configuration file to a particular phone based on which user the MAC address is assigned to. So you can see here it's primary user DID, the user, the device password. all of those are variables that would be phone and user specific. So you can come in here and you can create different templates for different phone types for that. All right, so as I mentioned a moment ago, in your DHCP server, you can put a URL that tells the phones where to go to download their file. And you'll see that URL directly under Provision Templates. This URL is specific to an SMB. So each SMB is going to have its own unique URL, and an organization would have its own unique as well. So please make sure if you are doing generic device provisioning that you give the appropriate URL to the SMB, because it is per SMB. Now, one thing to note about the device URL is this is the same URL that's provisioned on the ZTP servers. So if you have customers that don't want to use ZTP but want to manage it through their own DHCP servers for Polycom, Yealink, audio codes, and in the future Cisco, they can set it up the same way for those phone types as they are for whatever generic one they're doing. So they can set that up to do it just like any of the generic ones. You would need to know which DHCP option. You would need to Google the phone type. A lot of times it's option 160 or 66 or whatever. It differs per vendor. Okay, so when you're adding a generic device, so if we go provision device and we do add device, you would want to select the generic vendor type. And then there are the templates that were created for under the generic one. So you put in the MAC address, you select the vendor as generic, and then I can select the specific terminal type based on what's done. So one thing that I want to point out that we recommend, if you are doing something custom, create additional templates. So you can create as many templates as you want. So you can have multiple templates for the same phone type, but if you're doing something custom for a phone or a group of phones, create a different template for that. But please be aware that only one template can be assigned to a phone at a time. Okay, so I'm going to move on from generic device provisioning. If you have any questions, again, feel free to put them in the chat. So next we're going to move to device management. And I showed you in the partner portal where to enable the device key management for SMBs. And there's a difference in device management on a partner level versus an SMB or organization level. And it gets into really what we call scope. So we're going to talk about device parameters and groups and scope now. So under provision parameters, so what a group or a parameter is, a group is a grouping of parameters that can apply to a set of users, a site, specific device types. So it allows you to create basic templates, so to speak, and assign those to specific device types or specific users or specific sites, and not have to recreate the same thing for all of them. So under groups and parameters, you can see here, these are all what we have under Ribbon. We got a lot of parameters or a lot of groups created. And if I click on a group name, you'll see that you can specify the device types. Like, for example, this group parameter here applies only to a Polycom IP550 and only to a specific MAC address. Like I built this one specifically for a subscriber. One thing to point out is when you're selecting a device type for a parameter, you'll notice that the audio codes, the Cisco, are all yellow in this case. Polycom is not. So once I've selected that this group belongs to Polycom, it yellows out all of the other vendor types and will not let me assign them because its parameters are vendor specific. So let me return to the list. But you can see within the group, we have the parameters that are specific to that group, right? So we create a group and we add parameters to it. Now, a couple of things to point out. We can do these things manually. So I can come in here and I can do an add group, and I can select it based on, let's say, audio codes type, and you'll see those are grayed out, and give it a group name. Test AC, and I'll hit save. Then I can come back into that group and I can add parameters to it. I can do this all one at a time in here, but I can also, in here I can do add parameter. And if I know the parameters to do it, so I can select the group, test AC, and I can add the parameter and the value and do a set, and it's going to do it one at a time. But I can also do this via file. So to get to the file, you can always, in the portal, I'm going to abandon the change, you can hit the help button, and right under here, under help, is download the import template here. So you should periodically download the newest template, because any changes we make we're going to update the template in the portal. So you can always go to help and find the latest template for doing that. So with this, we really suggest coming up with templates and doing this by file, because it's a lot easier than adding them one at a time. So, all right, so one thing to point out about groups and parameters, you can add parameters at an SMB level, or you can add parameters at a partner level. And actually, both of them are valid. But if you add the same parameter at a partner level and then add the same parameter at an SMB level, what is defined at the SMB level takes precedence over what is found at the partner level. With one exception, you have the ability at the partner level to lock a parameter. And what that means is, by locking it, is I can set a parameter here and lock it. This means that even if the SMB were to add the same parameter, it's ignored by the portal and would not be sent down. So you can't lock a value at an SMB level, but you can lock any parameter at a partner level. So there are times where that might be important, maybe to lock the proxy that it's going to connect to, or something, to not allow the SMB to go in and do some funky configuration. So, but it's most specific to least specific. So if the same parameter exists at an SMB level versus a partner level, the SMB level takes precedence unless it's locked at the partner level. So the easier way to put that is the partner is more generic than the SMB. Okay, also from the add parameter help, you should be able to get the latest firmware. So by the way, anytime you're in here, if you hit the help, it gives you a description of what everything means. It's under device management. There it is. So under help, under device management, you can download the latest device firmware version list that we support and have access to in the portal, because you can specify a firmware for a phone to pick up. So if a phone's on version 5.7 and we have 5.8 available, you can specify when you build that phone to go to firmware version 5.8, and when the phone connects to us, it would download that version of the firmware. So here's the template again, and here is the device firmware list, and again, that's under help. All right, so let's talk about scope. What scope means is scope defines what a group belongs to, and there's a difference from what you'll see for a scope at an organization or SMB level versus a partner level. So if I do add group here, you can see this isn't an organization. It would be the same for an SMB. The scope allows me to define it based on device type. So I can say all audio codes or a Polycom VVX 500 or all Polycom or whatever. I can define it on a site level. So if you have some parameter that, let's say you need a call pickup line on a site or a speed dial based on a site, I can pick a site that it applies to. I can do it based on device, a device view. So I can say a device user view, I'm sorry. That I can say the device is owned by Dave Fowler, and it'll apply to that. Or device on the Mac view, which would go down to specific set of Macs, as an example. So to see something like that, if I look for, I think there's an ER one in here, that would be a good example of that. RTP. Yeah, here's one that this was set for a device Mac view, and if you'll notice, we've got 3 Macs that are, we needed these 3 phones for our emergency recovery department to have the same type of parameters, and it's going to be a call pickup group is what it's going to be. But we define down to a specific grouping of phones. We could have done the same thing with a specific grouping of users, or we could have put the users in a site and done it, but we chose for this one to be based on a Mac view. Now, if we look at the same thing from a partner perspective, if I go into provision parameters and I do a group, add group, my scope here is going to be different. Here, because it's at a partner level, I don't have a view of sites, users, the Macs. What I can do is either device type, so I can define something that's going to apply to all the Polycoms or all the A-Links, or I can apply it to a customer. So if you're creating a group for a specific customer, you can, or group of customers, you can do it to that level. So the scope from a partner perspective is either customer or device type. From an SMB org level, it's device type, site, user, or devices. Okay. So that's how you create groups. Groups are valuable and will be how you go through and set up all of your devices. And once you've started doing it, you can template it and change what you need to and import that way. So next, let's go back to the ribbon one. We're going to query, we're going to do some device querying. So let me go get I'll get Bill's device. So I was going to talk about this later, but I'm going to take a moment to talk about it now. When you, and we talked about this a bit in the previous webinar, when you see a status here in the portal, the status under the subscriber list is not necessarily real time. We query these, I think, every 15 minutes, and provide an updated status. The status overall here against the subscriber is a view of all of their devices versus individual ones. If you need a real-time view of the status of a device, you go into the subscriber themselves and you can see the devices. If you're unsure about what the status means or don't remember you can always do the help. And it will tell you in here, sorry, I clicked it twice. The yellow means the device status is unknown. That generally means it's a device that has been connected in the past, but we didn't see it unregister, but we haven't seen it register lately. Gray means it's offline, and green means it's active and ready to go. So for example, Phil's got a bunch of phones provisioned, but 2 of them were unplugged at some point, and he's got 3 other phones that are all green. We also have a button in here called Unmanaged Devices. So if you have devices that a user just logged into, it could be soft clients, it could be other phones that we don't manage, you would see those in here. And here it's WAM 9.7, which is the Smart Office client. And you can see he's not actively registered on that one. So let me go and I'm going to query one of these devices. So if you're curious which rules, etc., a device has, you can come under device parameters, go to query devices and do a query. And this will dump out the configuration file that is sent down to the phone. Right? This is the config file that gets sent down to the phone. All of the settings for the user, and this user has a lot. But if you don't like seeing it in the raw format, you can change the profile type to rules and then do a query device, and you'll see it more like you would with the parameters. So one thing to point out, anything you see here with system underscore is a device key. And we'll talk about device keys in a couple of minutes, but these are keys on the phone that you're setting to do some type of particular action. Could be BLF, like you'll see BLF, or speed dial or something. Those are line keys. But if you're curious that one phone is behaving differently than the others, you can go in and look for specific settings by querying the device. Now there are multiple ways. So we can query based on a MAC address, but we can also query, like for example, based on a user and see what gets sent down. If you have a hot desk user, and for those who are not aware of what hot desk is a setting that you can enable on a phone that allows a user to go and log in with a hot desk password. It's their user ID and a hot desk password, and then that phone will pull down the configuration associated with that user and all of the parameters. So it's allows the parameters and groups associated with a user to be moved from one device to another device. So let's say you've got people that travel to different offices. You can specify certain phones as hot desk phones. They log in and it pulls down their configuration specific to them, not necessarily what was specific to the phone. But if you want to query based on a user, if you have a hot desk user, you wouldn't query on a device, you would query on the user ID. But I can query, this is my user ID, you can see it gave a MAC address, the MAC address I'm logged in on, and then everything associated with my user. I can query based on VoIP number, so primary DID as an example. Let's do 30. Wrong number. Do mine. and you can see the parameters associated with that DID. So there's multiple ways to query a phone to see what is set for it. So you can do VoIP number, MAC address, or user ID. Okay, let me see. All right, so next we're going to talk about device keys. Now, what device keys are on the phones themselves. There are, depending on a model of phone, there are multiple keys on the phone, and we give you the ability to program those keys and allow the end user to program those keys. So I'm going to go and pull up a subscriber and show you how device keys work. I'll do Karen because he's got a lot of them. Now, as an administrator, because it was enabled for us, I can modify the user's device keys here. We don't suggest you get in the habit of doing this unless it's on a small basis because it's time consuming. You can template this as well and import as part of the groups and parameters. But you can see I can come in here, and here are the phone keys associated with that model type. In this case, it's a VVX 500. Now, in Phil's case, he has an expansion model on it, so I can select to do the expansion model, and you can see he's got a lot of different things provisioned in here, like a BLF with speed dial. So he's monitoring the presence of other users here, right? And all he had to do was select the function BLF with speed dial, and the portal knows the specific parameters to send down to the phone to subscribe to the dialogue of that particular user. But one question we get a lot, for example, would be, how do I log in a secondary line of another user? And you can come under the key device keys, and I can do line, and I can do Dave, and I can select the subscriber D Fowler, and search for that, and select that subscriber, and I can accept it, and that will log that user into that key position on there. I'm not going to do this because this isn't my phone, but that is how you can add a second line quickly to a subscriber. And again, once this is done, once you've done it once, you can query the device, get the configuration parameters to do, and you can create your own templates and import those. So, but you can add expansion keys in all of them associated with it. You can do soft keys. So on the Polycoms, for example, there are buttons for line keys, but there are also the ones with the touchscreens have soft keys. And you can come in and change the default positions of what those soft keys do and define something. So if you want to do a call forward or set something on the soft key that's different from the default, you would come under here, select the soft key, and do the same type of, right, a speed dial as an example, or call part, call retrieve, call return. So it gives you the ability to do soft keys or device keys with this. Now, to go back to the subscriber, pull him up. As an administrator, you have the ability to allow the subscriber to manage those themselves. So, is it under devices? Yeah, there it is. So once you select devices, there's an option in here, allow user to change keys in the end user portal. With that checked, it gives the user the ability to do their own managing of devices. If you think that might cause problems from people seeing something in the end user portal and playing around, you would uncheck that. I'm not gonna change his, but I'm gonna go into the end user portal and show you where that would be in here for the subscriber. So I'm logged into Phil's end user portal now. If I go into service settings, I see device keys. And then once I pull that up, here are the device keys associated with the MAC addresses. So he can do the same things that we were doing there. But again, I have the ability to turn that off for a subscriber. So you'll have to think through whether or not you want the subscribers in here messing with something, because they can come in and play around and change something, and then you're getting questions about why something's not working, or they can they could potentially log in another subscriber to their phone, and it can cause problems. So you really need to think through whether or not you trust the customer enough to have that capability. So, but it does exist, and it is controlled by the administrator as to whether or not they have the ability to do it. So, all right. So when you've made a change to a user's account, to a user, something in the user's phone. So let's say we change the user's first name, last name, or we change something else related to the phone, like the site password or whatever, and you need to pass that parameter down to the phone. We have something what's called a check sync. So I'm not gonna check sync his. I'm gonna go check sync mine because I don't care if it restarts. What a check sync does is a check sync will send a notify SIP message down to a phone, and the phones that support check sync, which Polycom and Yealink do, will take that notify, and then based on the phone itself, will either update the parameters or potentially reboot the phone, depending on if the phone requires a reboot or not. Some do, some do not. Some changes, like for example, Polycom updates some changes without requiring a phone restart. Other changes it requires a restart. One thing about the check sync is it's safe to do, because if a user is on a call, for example, they're on their Polycom, and you send down a check sync and it gets to notify, the phone will not restart when it's on an active call. It will queue it up itself when the user's done with the call, then it will go into the restart loop. But you also have the ability to schedule a check sync at a later time. But you can see here, so it tells you this may cause a device to reboot, and that just sent down a notify to my phone, and we'll restart the phone if it determines that. But I can come under sites and go to NA. RTP. And if I do a check sync here, I can immediately do it, or I can schedule the date and time to do this, right? It pulls up a calendar and time frame and will delay. So if you want to schedule something for after hours to do it, you can do that. And then the portal will know, it will look for any device that's provisioned under those sites and will send down the notifies at that period of time. So when you do it from a site level, again, you can select an immediate check sync or a scheduled check sync. So I covered device states. So I think that's pretty much what I wanted to cover. One thing I do want to point out is, as of portal release 47.2, when you're adding a speed dial as an example, the portal now supports, for Polycoms, the addition of commas in the speed dial string to induce a pause. So if you're connecting to some type of IVR, like a Meet Me conference or something, the portal you can input commas to do a pause. So for example, it'll dial the number, have a pause, wait to allow it to answer, and prompt you to enter a conference room. Then you can enter the conference room in the string, some more commas, and then the star if you need to enter the the administrator chair pin or something. So that was added in 47.2, which I think was in May. So just be aware in any speed dial you do now for Polycom that commas are supported. So, but I think that pretty much covers what I wanted to cover. So we can take this time now to go over any questions that you guys have. And if I can't answer it, Jason or Sarah would be able to, most likely.
Excellent. Thank you, Dave. And Sarah or Jason, did you want to mention any of the questions that have come in to the audience here?
Yeah, we've had some that we pushed so everybody could see the answers, but there's one in particular about the, from Robert Pettit. When you do line key configuration, are those assigned automatically in order or under the key that you select with the GUI? I answered it that, you know, if you click on that view, can you go back to device key where you see the phone itself, Dave? And then a further question in that was, when the button you're programming on the portal using line key.reassignment.enabled, when it's 0, it assigns it automatically. If it's set to 1, it can be selected by the key. So with the, I guess the question is, so with the GUI, does it override that parameter? So if you scroll up a little bit, you can see the key number, but if you hit show image, so you see here the number 1, it's always smart to do this so that you can see visually where it's going to show on the button or on the phone itself. So the 1 circle equals there. If you scroll down, you'll see the key on the left. So if I edit that one, the call Parkwood notification, the 1 in the left matches the circle 1 in the above diagram picture.
Right. And if you'll notice, Phil does not, I mean, he's specifically putting them in certain spots on the phone. He left a lot of these blank. So it's not going to automatically fill in missing ones. You specify where on the phone you want it to show.
Right. And you can hide that as well for real estate on the screen, but it's a good kind of best practices to always not just start at the number 1 and go down, because that on different phones may appear on the left side or the right side kind of thing.
Right.
Several people wanted a copy of the previous troubleshooting video, so I don't know, John, if you can post that for all.
Yep, I'll take care of that.
And let's see, are there any other questions? Oh, here's one. CheckSync won't reboot the device unless it's a configuration change. I thought it would also be, it could be used for rebooting a device remotely. Can you answer that one, the CheckSync?
Well, again, it's dependent on device type, and I think Jason might know which ones it will reboot. Depends on what has changed and what the device requires. Some phones, a CheckSync, it's going to reboot automatically. In other phones, it will only reboot under certain circumstances. So it's phone specific.
Yeah, it depends, Dave, on how they've implemented CheckSync. I believe Yealink off the top always reboot on CheckSync receipt, and some have a settable PARM for it. Polycoms tend to reboot if there's a change parameter that requires it.
Right. Thank you, Jason.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for the questions. It's great to see how everyone's interacting and learning more about the solutions that we're showing today. And with that, we'll conclude things for this webinar. Thank you very much to everyone who's attended. And thank you to Dave, to Sarah, and to Jason for the presentation today. And please look forward to more marketing items that can help you be better equipped with the Kandy solutions. Look for those to come into your inbox in the coming months. And again, as we mentioned, we'll send the webinar replay within 48 hours. And with that, we'll conclude things for today. Thank you very much and have a great rest of your day.
Hey, one last thing is if you do have topics you want to talk about, you can always email customersuccess@rbbn.com with those topics, and we'll look at those coming in, and we'll try to meet the needs with the next Fireside Chats.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. I just put that also in the window, the chat window for everyone to have the email address there. So glad you mentioned that. So please, folks, if you have any things that you want to have addressed in these webinars, please send an email to customersuccess@rbbn.com. These webinars are for you to help you better do your deployments, and we want to do everything we can to help you. So your feedback is greatly appreciated.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.